Hello,
Hi.
everyone.
Oh, it's so great to see our friends again. Welcome, welcome.
Yes, welcome to Friday. This is, oh my goodness, this attendee list is just going up and up. I am loving it. Welcome to Friday, everyone who is always with us on Team Live. We all want to kick off for Team Replay too, because we appreciate you as well and all the support that we get outside of even being live. So thanks everyone for being here. Just want to quickly go over our ground rules before I introduce our wonderful guest, Angela Garmon. But just as you know, many of you who have been with us already, if you're not comfortable on camera, feel free to turn it off and we will be unrecorded for a little bit afterwards, maybe about 10-15 minutes, and feel free to turn them on then. Totally your comfort level. We'd love to see your lovely faces if you want to be there on camera, but this is a safe space that we created, so please be respectful of each other and the guests. We're all looking forward to learning and growing together. So this is our second to last December and Friday show. We will be actually, for the next week, we'll have a show, and then on the series the next 2 weeks following that we won't, because of the holidays. So we'll put some more information out there about that. But Suman, anything else about ground rules that we have not covered before I tell them all about Angela?
There we
Okay.
go. No, you did a great job. Everything, it's being recorded, so be mindful of what you share with us. We're going to spend another 10 or 15 minutes after we turn off the recording if anyone has more questions or for that more laid back conversation. Otherwise, the replay will go out and y'all are in for a great conversation with Angela.
Yeah, perfect segue. Let's talk about Angela. So, Angela Garmon is the leading voice for effective change management. She is a sought after speaker and facilitator who delivers a variety of engaging talks on topics such as what we're going to hear today that enable others to conquer change and to cultivate their desired results. Angela is the CEO of ARG Coaching and Consulting Group, which is a strategic consulting firm that assists leaders and helps them overcome barriers of change while they increase their organizational performance. Love that. That's HR all day. Angela's passion and focus are on bridging the disparity gaps for women and minority-owned executives. So I know that's part of our topic today. And as a special treat, in breaking news today, Angela has won the Martin Luther King Living Your Dreams Award for social justice and creating parity for women in businesses. Hello, that is amazing. Congratulations. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Angela. Angela, do you want to tell us what inspired you to be here today?
When I met Suman at NABO, we just had this great conversation, and I am always looking for places to really have those deep dive conversations about some of the challenges that women businesses face. And so anytime I can be part of the conversation, I look forward to it. And I am so excited about being part of the conversation today. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into it, unless you had another question for me, Tiffany. It's me?
Nope, not at all. I was like, where's that mute button?
Awesome.
No, not at all. I am anxious and I know we're all ready and willing. So let's kick it off.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for having me. Super excited. So, systemic racism impacts minorities in this country for centuries. Yet, we continue to have these conversations where people believe that equity has been achieved. So, I was talking with this group of women not too long ago, all of whom identify as non minority or Caucasian women. And we were talking about supporting the Equal Rights Amendment. And I wanted to share with you how that conversation went. So one woman said, "Why do we need to support an initiative that give women equal rights? We already have equal rights. Look how far we've come. We're 80 cents on the dollar." Another woman responded, "Yeah, and who are we to change the Constitution?" Well, if it hadn't been for the 13th Amendment, I probably would not be here talking to you today. And had it not been for the 19th Amendment, women wouldn't even have the right to vote. So what I learned about being part of this group is that if we cannot agree on that fundamental mathematical equation that 80 cents does not equal a dollar, then how can we begin to have these deeper conversations about race and gender and their impact that it has on the wealth creating capacity for minority businesses, right? And so we have to be willing to have these conversations, but first, finding that common ground so that we can begin to really make a change in our communities, in our organizations, and really think about how systemic issues are impacting our neighbors, our friends, our coworkers. And so I love this quote by Maya Angelou. She said, "Each time a woman stands up for herself, without knowing it, possibly without claiming it, she stands up for all women." So as Tiffany shared, for those of you who are just coming into the Zoom room, my name is Angela Garmon, founder and CEO for ARG Coaching and Consulting Group. And it's a strategic consulting firm where I bridge the gaps between people and processes. And I enjoy having these critical conversations or crucial conversations around inclusivity and leading change within your organizations, within your communities. So I really broken today down into 5 different parts. And I can't stress this enough. I hope that it's engaging. I want to create a collaborative space to where people are able to share their thoughts and really expand their thoughts and their visions for their communities. So I'll share a brief history about myself. We'll talk about the systems and how they can be oppressive. We'll talk about the state of women business ownership. I am always that practical lady. So really, how can you take this information and apply it forward in your own organization, in your own community? So we'll offer some solutions for both the woman business owner, as well as if you work in a corporation or if you're part of a larger community that volunteers. And then finally, we will end with a project that I am currently working on, and I would invite you to be part of that project. I do have a puppy behind me, so if you hear some noises, you might be hearing him. But by the end of this time, by the end of our time together, I really hope that you understand the financial impact that systemic racism plays on minority and women-owned businesses. We'll discuss ways that we can begin to cultivate the ecosystem that creates inclusiveness, and it's beneficial for all business owners, specifically minority women-owned businesses. And then we will leave with actionable items, again, for ways that you can really support minority women-owned businesses growth. So are you guys ready? Thumbs up, heart, all that. Awesome. So I will ask Suman and Tiffany, please monitor the chat. If you see something that comes up, please just stop me. Would love to have those conversations. And then as I ask questions, please feel free, if someone wants to raise their hand, Tiffany, Suman, just stop me, and then we'll dive in a little bit deeper. So just a little bit about me. So I grew up in the hospitality industry. I spent about 15 years in the industry. And in 2007, I got my Six Sigma Green Belt certification. Part of that certification requirement was to roll out a project that first year. And I rolled out this project that generated about $980 something thousand in cost savings for the resort. And it began to get so much traction, they asked me to roll it out at another resort locally. And so I rolled it out, saved them $250,000 before 6 months. And then it became a regional and a national best practice, right? And so as it started to begin to gain so much traction, someone else, a white male, took ownership of the project. And I remained quiet. But these are some of the challenges that I faced when I was in the industry. I was pretty much the only Black manager within the organization for the entire 12 years that I was with this corporation. And so I was always used to being in a space where my ideas and my thoughts became someone else's. And so today, as we talk about this conversation, I want to challenge you, whether you're on that end where someone is taking your ideas, or whether you're on the other end where maybe you might have taken someone's ideas and owned it as your own. I want you to really think about that, because we all continue to really perpetuate this cycle of systemic racism. When we choose not to talk about it, we choose to perpetuate it. So please use your voice and elevate your voice, especially when there are, when you might be part of a larger organization and you see people's ideas are becoming someone else's. So I grew up in the industry, you know, had a relatively successful career. I grew up in the ranks. And so I was looking to become a controller at one point. And I remember them telling me that I did not fit the mold. I did not have the qualifications. Well, what mold is that? Because when I look around, I see my white counterparts in those positions. So what mold are you talking about? I don't have the qualifications. They said, well, you don't have a degree. Well, he doesn't have a degree, nor does he. So why is it that I'm required to have a degree where others are not? So again, look at your practices, understand what's going on and how they might be impacting others within those organizations. So later on, I transitioned out of the hotel industry into this world of entrepreneurship. My hotel actually changed flagship, and I lost my job over that time. And so I started contracting with the company, which kind of really catapulted me to this entrepreneurship journey. And so over that time, I was really looking for my tribe, a place to belong. And I ended up with NABO, which is how I met Suman. And so ended up at NABO. And let me tell you, for those of you who are not familiar with Arizona, in Arizona, the African American population is about 4%. So very similar to the hotel industry, where I was pretty much the only Black leader in the room. I was the only Black person in many cases when I joined different networking groups, different associations. And so being mindful of being very different. In the hotel industry, it wasn't as bad, but coming into this space where I wasn't quite sure of who I am as an entrepreneur, you know, I was really looking for this group of women who would just embrace me. And I really found that in NABO. But the challenges were still very same, and they were very similar. And so what I found as this budding entrepreneur is that as a Black woman, I enter the room and I'm introducing myself to all of these fabulous women. But the first question they would ask me after I would tell them that I'm this change management consultant is, what are your qualifications? And I watch as they run around, as everybody mingle around the room and they're making these introductions. And I'm being mindful of wondering whether or not they're asking all of their other counterparts, what are your qualifications? They weren't. And so again, being mindful of the spaces that you're in, I want you to pay attention to, if someone is different, are you treating them differently or are you embracing them? And so, entrepreneurship, it is definitely an arduous journey in and of itself, but make sure that you find those people that really embrace you, that love you, and that really wants to propel you forward. And we will talk about that a little bit more as we start to dive into solutions for entrepreneurship. I am a Cancer conqueror. 2 years ago, you probably would not have even recognized me. I was completely bald-headed. I looked like one of the Wakanda warriors. So I had this completely bald head, but wouldn't change my journey for a moment. And it was over that time where I was really able to double my income because I learned what scaling is all about. And so, we've all had these tough times in life, but what I am really all about is really helping people facilitate change, maximizing change to their advantage. And so ideally, when we finish with this, You guys, we're all going through this season of COVID, right? And even in the midst of this season of COVID, we have struggled as a community, as a nation, with social and political unrest. And so we have all fallen victim to some of the nuances and some of just the ugliness that is going on in this country. And so again, I am so grateful for you guys to be part of this conversation, because that means that you really want change. You really are looking for change within your community. And as I typically share whenever I'm speaking, your presence makes a difference. And so by the mere fact that you're here, you are going to make an impact on this group. You are going to make an impact in your community, your organization. So I definitely appreciate you being here. There are 3 descriptors that I find for myself: advocate, educator, and strategist. And so as an advocate of change, I use my voice and these multimedia platforms really to create awareness around gender and racial inequalities in our business ecosystem. As an educator, I really love to help people understand in the seasons that they're going through, helping them to embrace the changes. So again, so that they can maximize them. So you'll find me constantly speaking or leading conversations like this. And then as a strategist, again, just really helping to dive into your organization, expanding thoughts, expanding visions. So if there aren't any questions as it relates to me, I'm going to dive into this next topic, which is really talking about the systems and how they oppress. So I want to start out with just the basic definition of racism, just so we are all on the same page. So when we think about racism, the basic definition at its core is the systemic oppression of racial groups to the social, economic, and political advantage of another. And so as we begin to dive into these systems, I want you to think about really the communities that you're part of, the organizations that you're part of, because most systems are fallible at conception because they're not designed for everyone to excel. And in many cases, the concerns for the minority, meaning those who are not represented at the table, at the decision-making process, they're not part of the equation. So when you think about our systems, you think about the government, our laws, our school systems, your corporations you might work at, entrepreneurship, banking, they have all pretty much been dominated by white men. And so minorities, especially Black women, struggle to get a seat at the table. And many organizations, they will tout diversity, but when you look at their diversity, if you look at their leadership team, then ultimately what they're saying is diversity to them is or are white women. So again, leaving others, leaving them underrepresented and voiceless. So quick question for you. How could this lack of diversity in leadership be a barrier for minority women business owners as they scale and grow their businesses? And if we can just hear from maybe a couple of people who might want to share some thoughts on that. I see a
I'll be
hand.
happy to say something.
I see a couple of hands. So Stephen, and I didn't hear, was that Gail?
It was, but I'll put myself on mute. You call
No,
me.
go ahead, Gail. And then we'll go back to Stephen.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Well, I think because people have a tendency to be in their own groups, right? So they know people, and before you know it, they're only reaching out to the people they know to bring them in. They're not expanding their groups in their social circles to be able to build a relationship with somebody outside their who they look like and who they go to church with, who they have dinner with. And I think that's a big problem.
Yes, thank you so much, Gail. Stephen, would you like to add to that?
There's only 2 things in life that are guaranteed. One, you're going to die. One, things change. Things change constantly. I know how I was raised. as a little kid, 5, 6, 7 years old. Sometimes change doesn't happen quick enough. Sometimes change happens very quickly, but it happens. In this country, and that's the only thing I can speak to, is in this country, change has been happening, change is happening. However, I'll give a sports term. You cannot in football, as a runner, you should not outrun your blockers.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, people are changing and people are coming up and other ethnic groups are coming up. Why were white males dominant in this country? Because they were the main people in this country in the 40s, the 50s, the early 60s. That's all changing. We as white males are becoming the past, the old, because times are changing and sometimes people are too close where they really can't see that change. But as a white male, I see it. It doesn't bother me. It may bother others, doesn't bother me though.
Mm-hmm. And, thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you so much, Gail, for speaking up. And yes, the times are changing. We are seeing transitions happen. And, going back to my opening, right? 80 cents isn't a dollar. And so while we see these changes happening, these changes aren't happening as rapidly and as fast for minorities. As you mentioned, the 1940s, we still didn't have equal rights. And even to this day, we still are fighting for, for equality and parity. And so to both of your points, yes, the key decision makers are the ones that really decide on how money and resources are spent. And
Angela, can I interrupt just a quick second? Sorry, I just wanted to read some of the comments that were in the chat, if that was okay.
Yep, please do.
Okay, so it says here, someone said it was tough to get funding. Another person says, I could imagine that women of color will have more problems obtaining permits, obtaining help, financing, etc. Someone says, as a recruiter, I agree. We tend to use our own default networks. It takes effort to expand our networks. And lastly, it says, and many of the white males currently in power, they will do everything possible to keep their power and wealth.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I just wanted to add a couple of those thoughts that people had to your question.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much, Suma. And all of them, yes, all of them equally valid, all of them so important, right? And so the whole thought and the whole point is really to identify those systems, identify those barriers and those biases, as mentioned in the chats. And so, it isn't, I wrote an article not too long ago on systemic racism and the effects of it, questioning whether or not it is the system, right? And so at the end of one of the articles that I wrote, it says that, because I'm in Phoenix or in Gilbert, but a subsidiary of a city within the Phoenix metropolitan area. And so one of the things I said, we're all Phoenix. And if one of us rise, we all rise. And we have to remember that about our ecosystem as well. This isn't necessarily a competition per se, but we can all get a piece of the pie. And so just making room for others who are different. And when we find ourselves resisting what is different, we have to figure out ways to embrace it and really bring others along. And as Gail had identified, people normally do business with people who look like them, people who are within their circle. So as I talk about Phoenix, so Arizona prides itself in being gender and race neutral. So late last year, I had received this email and it was flooded with this call to action. It was just a series of emails back to back. And there was this forum that was called by the governor to discuss the growth of Arizona's entrepreneur ecosystem. And when you looked at the picture that was posted on LinkedIn, all you saw are white men. And so when you think about the ecosystem here in Arizona, where the African American community, yes, we are small, but the Hispanic community is a large community. We have entrepreneurs, every race, every gender. So when you're facilitating meetings, be mindful of who's called to the table. Make sure that every voice, again, is being heard, or they have a seat at the table, so that we can expand minds, expand thoughts, expand visions, and make sure that every voice, again, is heard. So states and municipalities have that ability to ensure that set-asides are available for diverse suppliers. So does everybody understand what set-asides are?
I'm not familiar. I'm not. Can you, just for anyone who may not know?
Yeah, so if you're looking to work with the government they can create, or when they're creating contracts, they actually can create set-asides for women business enterprise, minority business enterprises. So they can say this specific contract is, we're looking for a woman or minority to fulfill this contract specifically. And so our state doesn't necessarily have, or they don't provide set-asides for minority or women-owned businesses because they're gender neutral. And so having set-asides could be the difference between a woman or minority getting a contract versus a white male. And so we do business with people that we look like. And so as a community, we have that ability to really talk to our state officials and begin to affect change. Look at how we're currently working within our own states and see if we can implement things differently there. See if we can rally behind something that is going to support women and minority-owned businesses. So and we'll talk a little bit about set-asides and certifications and how they can help women businesses and minorities going forward. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But when you think about the banking systems continue to discriminate against people of color. And someone said that in the comments earlier. But at the launch of PPP, the PPP loans, I read an article that said 95% of African Americans didn't even or couldn't even qualify or didn't even get the funds essentially that were given with that first launch. So again, we continue to be left behind. The same article said that about 45% of minority-owned businesses shut down within the first 30 to 60 days of COVID. And so again, finding ways to really begin to strengthen our ecosystem. So I love this quote by Nick Hanauer. He had this TED Talk and it was called The Dirty Secrets of Capitalism. So if you wanted to take a listen to it, great insight and information. But his quote said, "Successful economies are not jungles, they're gardens, which is to say markets like gardens must be tended." So it's up to each and every single one of us to tend the markets that we're part of. And where we're leaders, we have to push for equality to even out that playing field for women of color. So would love to take a short pause here. Are there any thoughts, any other thought that might have hit the chat, or any questions that might have popped up during the portion where we're talking about just the systemic issues?
There was one, and I don't know if we touched on this one yet because it seemed like we were maybe going to head down this path later in your presentation. If it makes sense to say it now, I'll just share it. But you can tell me if you prefer to table it till later. But someone said, "I'd love to talk about how, as a white woman executive, I can talk about advancing women's positions in the marketplace and bringing my sisters of color and varied genders with me. I feel like when I talk about women's advancement, it's seen separately from diversity conversations in general." Amen, holler. I guess I'm asking for help with that, not really that I want to talk about it. So how do I think you did start to touch on a lot of this, and I think we'll get into it further, but I wanted to call that specific comment out because I think it's powerful.
That is powerful. And there was a lot in there. So let's break it down to the very first one. And she asked, how does she bring women of color along? And what was her name? Just if you don't mind. Oh, Linda.
That was Linda. I'm like, she's not shy. I don't think she minds. I'm always cautious So
I'm a name person. So Linda, how do you bring women of color along? First of all, identifying a woman of color or women of color who could potentially, who you could potentially mentor, or, you know, mentor sometimes can, I read this statistic about women and the growth of entrepreneurship. And it said that women who are mentored have a 33% higher chance of survival. And so I know that was around mentorship in the business or in the entrepreneur world. But when you think about that from a corporation perspective, if you are pouring into other women, you can never go wrong. So first of all, just identify women, ask them the simple question, where is it that you want to go? And how can I get you there? And so as a woman, as a non-minority woman, you have the ability to really help remove barriers that impact women of color by helping them to elevate their voice. And so find ways to where you can really help her in her journey and you know, be that voice beside her saying, have you considered this? Or, you know, what can I do to assist you? So I would definitely start there. And having those conversations with them. How can you help move them forward? I hope I answered that question. And Tiffany, was there anything else that I might have missed?
no,
Okay.
I think that was very comprehensive. Thank you so much for answering that. And Linda, thank you for asking it. Stephen, I can see is chomping at the bit. He's got something to say. What's up, Stephen? Share with us.
Angela, you reminded me of something very important. Years ago, when MBEs, WBEs, and DBEs first came about, the whole point was not the money for those businesses. That was the secondary point. The main point was, to what Linda, your response, to mentor, to help, to educate. So it was that the major company would get the work, but then give 5%. It was like usually 5% for woman-owned businesses and 25% for minority-owned businesses, but it was to help them, educate them, mentor them. And that's what the real point was. Now people forget that part and they just focus on getting that 5% of the money or 25% or 30%. They forget the mentoring part and teaching.
I love that, Stephen. And you know what? We're going to talk about that as we start to talk about solutions, you know, and tiers. So we'll definitely dive into that. So that's a great point. So now I want to talk a little bit about the state of women business ownership. So the impact of systemic racism continues to show up in data for minority women-owned businesses. But again, collectively, we can begin to break down those systems that create parity for business, create parity in our business community. And as Stephen said, you know, yes, set-asides are definitely there to help with the percentage, but we're going to try to flip that on its head. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. But I want to start out with this little pop quiz. So in 2019, what was the national earned average revenue per firm for African-American owned firms? So when you look at it on a national average per firm basis, what was the national earned average? Don't Google, don't Google, don't do it. Just drop some numbers in the chat. I saw you. No idea. Awesome, I see no idea. Anybody want to take just a guess, a numeric guess? Couldn't even venture. Well, okay.
No idea.
No idea. Okay, so I'm just going to tell you. According to the 2019 State of Women-Owned report that's commissioned by American Express, African-American or Black-owned firms earned an average of $24,000 per firm. Compared to our non-minority women counterparts, care to guess? $218,000 per firm. That is the largest gap amongst all women owned firms. Yeah, wow. It is huge. That's a huge disparity. And I'm on a mission to affect change, closing that gap for minority owned businesses. And when you look at just Black women owned firms, we make up 21% of all women owned firms, representing the largest minority group. And in fact, we are the fastest growing group right now when you look at women business ownership. There are roughly 2.6 million Black owned firms nationwide. And if parity were reached, you guys ready? If parity was reached, $522 billion in revenue will circulate through our ecosystem. All minority women groups continue to fall behind our white counterparts. If parity was reached for all minority women-owned businesses, that would bring in an additional $981 billion for revenues generated for women business owners nationwide. So how can we dismantle these systems? So first of all, by requiring our states and local cities to provide those set-asides for WBEs and MBEs. And to Stephen's point, yes, it's about mentorship. It's about bringing someone alongside you, not just to fulfill. So Stephen, I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I have an acquaintance here in Arizona. She happens to have all of the certifications necessary. She's a contractor in the construction area. And so male counterparts leveraged her certification, promised her that they would leverage her and utilize a certain percentage of business for her specific firm. But when it actualized, they just leveraged her certification, but pushed her aside. Because there are no laws, because there are no restrictions or say anything that states that they have to fulfill that part, no follow-up, no accountability, they just pushed her aside. So the laws so we do need to look at the way that we do set asides on a state level and begin to make sure that we are really, if we're leveraging certifications, that again, we are leveraging them wholly. We're mentoring, but we're also utilizing them to do the work and to facilitate the work. Again, the goal isn't just to get a piece of the pie just for sake of having it, but to actually grow and scale our businesses. So leveraging us is not enough, but really utilizing us, incorporating us into those actual bids and those actual processes. So diversify boards. If for those of you who have not heard of Women on Board 2020, it's a great platform to where they're really growing women to be part of larger Fortune 500 corporations and be part of their boards. So, diversifying boards, corporate leadership teams to really ensure that the key stakeholders look like the communities that they represent. And as I shared before, just amplifying minority voices. So even when it's uncomfortable to do so, we have to be willing and able. Whenever I always tell people, if we're resisting something, really figure out why you're resisting it. And once you really drill down into why you're resisting it, then the chances are you can begin to address whatever is making you uncomfortable. And most of the time, it's just something's changing, right? Something is changing, status quo is being removed. And so I always tell people whenever I talk about change management, the first thing, whenever you're going through this season of change, whenever you find yourself resisting it, first identify what the it is, but then figure out how can you embrace it. If it's not detrimental to you, figure out how you can embrace it, because the sooner you begin to embrace what is going on, the sooner you're able to move forward, the sooner you're able to put goals into place. So support banks, that provide fair banking practices for all. There's this lovely lady here. She leads Local First, but she does this great talk about the ecosystem in Arizona. But supporting local banks, you tend to have the ability to really have build a relationship with local banks a lot faster than the big banks. And typically the local banks will have they focus on minority lending and making sure that the practices are extremely fair. And then if you're a corporate or you work for a corporation, ensure that you push diverse leaders and people in your talent pool. So really look for people that really want to grow, that might share the same values as your organization. Look for those quiet voices, because sometimes they might not know how to navigate that system, but they do great work, quality work, and you can groom them and bring them along. So are there any questions or thoughts that I should pause on, Tiffany or Suman?
Yep, this chat, as usual, is blowing up, which is fantastic. All right, I'm starting from the bottom up because it's easier for me to look at it that way. So people were asking, when you gave that statistic of $24,000 to $200,000, they were asking, is that all across businesses or similar businesses? Does that include businesses such as residential cleaning businesses, things like that? They were trying to understand where that dollar amount came from, what it encompass.
Yeah, so essentially the report, and I'll drop it, let me see if I can drop it in the chat box as well. But essentially it is any woman that identifies as a woman and minority race, and I just dropped it in there so you guys will have that for yours. But it's a nationwide report, probably driven, and I don't want to speak to the actual data in and of itself, but to my understanding, it's all women business owners that are registered as women business owners. And so it's a roll up. So it doesn't necessarily specify industries, but it looks at women business ownership as a whole and having those identifiers.
Great. Thanks for that clarification. And then there's another comment here. It says the problems with many set-asides is that they're ultimately won by organizations who technically have the set-aside status, but are not really benefiting from the intended recipient of the set-aside.
Mm-hmm. So there are different ways that you can leverage your certification and leverage other people in the community, right? So I was talking with this gentleman, and I was going to share that later, but it continues to come up. So I was talking with this gentleman just about business growth as a whole. And he said, Angela, leverage your certification by talking with your competitors. He's like, chances are it's going to be a white male who's dominating the industry. He said, but have coffee with him. And when you have coffee, to first of all, see if you can build a relationship with him, but ask him specifically, is there, especially if there's a contract out there that you're interested in, or that that you have that qualifications for your organization, that is. So see if he would be willing to Stephen's point, mentor you, right? But bring you into this contract. It could be a 2-year contract. It could be, a short contract, but you offer your certification as leverage for a percentage of the business. But the caveat is that he has to use you. He has to use your organization. He has to teach you and groom you. And so he said, go into it with, you know what, you can leverage my certification because it states that you have to have this woman's certification or minority certification. I get 30%. I work on it with you. I'm part of those conversations. And so they're going in, they're the first tier. So they're the main, you're a subcontractor within them. And then the next time that same contract come to bid, ask them, would they be willing to again, assist you, this time you being main, and they come in as your subprime. So you have the weight and the power behind them. And then, the next time that comes open, then now you can begin to even the playing field. Do you want to play, or do you want to compete? So, then you have the opportunity to say, thank you, I appreciate your mentorship. So leveraging your certification, you just have to be strategic with it, and you just have to be wise about it. But whatever you agree to, make sure, if it's a joint venture, make sure that everything is in writing, and that they're leveraging you, and that you're doing your due diligence as well, because the last thing you want to do is come into this contract, believe that you're ready, and you're not quite ready. So make sure that you do your due diligence as well to make sure that you're able to uphold your end of the bargain. Thank you, Sumi. Was there anything else that you wanted?
Yep, that was great. So someone else put in here, from the perspective of an infant nonprofit, it's difficult to get the attention and support of the public. It seems like the route is supporting large and widely recognized organizations. For instance, it's easier for an athlete to support a national organization rather than a small and new organization, more worried about their image and reputation than making a significant difference with a small organization.
Mm-hmm. So to that point, I would say build relationships, right? And that's what it's really all about. As you start to build out relationships, pretty much people, we've identified this, but people do business with people that they know. So put yourself in spaces where people will begin to recognize you, but then also recognize what you're doing for the community. Don't be afraid to start out small. So looking for small dollars, but first of all, make sure your ask is extremely clear. And they know where those funds are going. But again, putting yourself in spaces, getting yourself in front of those key decision makers so that they understand exactly what you do, who you do it for, and where their money is going. But you're right, for smaller operations, it is hard, especially nonprofits. First thing they think is, oh, you're asking for money. But figure out the relationship. Also, find a way that if you're asking for dollars, how does it help the organization that you're asking? How does it help them live out their mission or their social responsibility? And the sooner you can tie their social responsibility with what it is that you do, then chances are it will give you a greater opportunity to build those relationships, those connections, and those dollars. Awesome. Anything
That's
else?
great. You're getting a lot of kudos here. Angela, you're a wonderful speaker, very informative, lots of hearts for me. I think what you're saying, while in the big space sounds simple, it's we don't link all of those ideas together and bring it to fruition. So thank you for bringing it all together.
Well, my pleasure, Suman. And that's what, that's really what it's all about. Again, I want you guys to leave with some practical takeaways. So anything that I can do to assist.
Yep. Keep it going. This is great. Thank you.
So now we're moving into the topic of solutions for women business enterprises. And I've given you guys quite a bit. So I was talking with this gentleman. His name was Dave. And his wife was just like, you have to talk to Angela. You have to talk to Angela. She's this phenomenal woman. And so she kind of coerced her husband to talk to me. He owned a consulting firm at one point in time. And he was giving me all of these valuable tips and tools, and I'm writing frantically. And I'm like, oh, I can do that. Oh, I'm doing that, right? And so he said, Angela, you just got to get to that decision maker. He said, my first client was NASA. I said, NASA? I don't even have any contacts at NASA, right? And so we think about it, to Suman's point, yes, it could be so easy, right? Yes, it can sound so simple, right? But really, when you think about it, many women do not, especially minority women, our circles do not include many times the CEO of NASA. And so how do you begin to break down those barriers? Well, first of all, I would tell you is to find a nice entry point for yourself. It might not be the CEO, because if I called the CEO of NASA, he would say, Angela, who? And why are you calling me? Why don't you talk to my admin? I probably couldn't even get to him. I probably couldn't even get to his admin. But you know, you really want to find those soft entry points. So find organizations like NABO, so National Association of Women Business Owners, whose primary focus is advocacy efforts and really that business development for women. And you know, really it becomes your tribe, your community, those women who are really going to push you forward and to make sure that you have what you need to be successful. There's WeBank. And so I've been talking all day about women's certification, but WeBank is the national organization that really certifies. It's the largest certifying agency for women business enterprises. And then you have the National Minority Supplier Diversity Council. So all of those organizations really help businesses with business development and mentoring. And, you know, find someone that can really, whether it's in your community, look for someone that can really begin to mentor you. Somebody that's gone before you. It does not have to be in the same industry that you're in. My mentor, I say it all the time, Jackie Wazalik is my mentor. And as an entrepreneur, she has, I always say this, I don't know if it's true, but she has the largest print firm in Arizona, but she is truly a fabulous woman. And in any way that she can help me, whether that's expanding my thoughts, just, you know, look for people that will really rally behind you and support you. So differentiate your brand. Quickly differentiate your brand from all of your competitors. And in some cases, being diverse will probably help you, especially when you're looking to work with corporate suppliers or government suppliers. In many cases, you know, they're looking for diversity. I know Texas does a call all the time for minority and women business owners. So it just depends on your state. Understand what your state has, understand what the corporation's needs are. And then again, how can you fulfill those needs? So getting those distinctions and those certifications will definitely help you as you look to as you look for different contracts or to fulfill different contracts. And can I just say, diversify your portfolio? Diversify your portfolio as much as possible. You know, you might have a niche market, but make sure that you have a very diverse market to where you can begin to market to in different industries. It's really important. And some of you guys might have experienced that through COVID. And last in this point, collaborate. Collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. So ask your network for assistance. Any chance that you get, if you can build a power team, a group of people that you can really strengthen your contracts with, you know, look for other people to really come alongside you so you can really fulfill those contracts. I was talking with a woman here who, we were talking about women business ownership in the Valley. And so you want, for whatever reason, many officials don't believe that, or some, I shouldn't say many, some officials don't believe that women are serious about business, right? And so I was having this conversation and she said, Angela, most women are lifestyle businesses. And I think that that is a broad brush that we paint, but we already come with some stereotypes, some generalizations, and then also the systemic issues that oppress us. So you really want to make sure that you have enough people behind you when you're looking to fulfill contracts. So I can't say it enough to collaborate. And just, you know, find ways to, again, support each other, talk each other up. And so, you know, are there any thoughts or any questions or anything that you would like for me to dive into in that section? And if not, I'm good.
I thought, oh, never mind. Suman's got that one. It was Isabel was asking about NABO, and Suman's taking the lead on that. She's going to tell how wonderful it is. So we're covered there. Anybody else? Any other thoughts or anything you'd like Angela to dive into before we wrap?
And I think going back to the collaboration, right? It's similar to how we're doing it here, right? Angela and I got in a conversation and here she is presenting to our amazing audience. It's getting her out, sharing those stories. I mean, it can be as simple as that, or even I've seen Tiffany do these 10, 15-minute really quick lives where she's talking with someone about a topic and they decide, okay, let's just get on right now and have the conversation live. It's the sharing and the educating, and that's part of bringing the person along with you. While you may not be physically doing that to one person, it's getting the message out to the audience as a whole.
Right. And I'm above. I think there's this saying, and if I get it wrong, forgive me. But there was this quote that says, "Collaboration is the new competition." And so when you think about it, we are not competing with each other. I laugh I chuckle to myself quite often, because if there's 60 people in the room, I can guarantee you that 59.5 of us are consultants in some way, shape, or form, right? And so, sometimes when you go into these rooms, you can tell if some of them are extremely competitive. And so I never look at another business as my competitor. I figure out how can we collaborate, because I always say that nobody can ever do what I do. I can't do what you do. We all bring something very different and a different dynamics to the table. So find ways, again, if you're resisting, find reasons to embrace. And so finally, I want to talk a little bit about this project that I am launching. And so I recently finished my tenure as president for NABO Phoenix, the National Association of Women Business Owner Phoenix chapter. And so I focused much of my attention and efforts on creating awareness in the Valley, specifically around the disparity gap for women businesses. So we saw this increase. I think it was right around 58% increase in the number of businesses, women-owned businesses, that have begun to show up in the Valley. But when you looked at the revenue, we only showed like a 1.8% increase in revenue over the same time period. And so what is impacting that growth? Well, again, when I was talking to a state official, and she said, well, we don't really focus on that. We're gender neutral. Women tend to be lifestyle. Well, we all know that what doesn't get measured doesn't grow. And so really, that's really my focus, is how can we create these measurable results? How can we begin to have these conversations and change the systems so that we can really begin to measure the success and the growth of women business owners? And if there's a hole, how can we fulfill it? How can we really begin to strengthen? And so one thing that I am most proud of, is that our chapter actually won Chapter of the Year for the first time at the end of my tenure. So it was pretty phenomenal. We got recognized for so many different awards, including a Silver Stevie Award for our nonprofit response for our advocacy efforts over COVID. So it was pretty phenomenal, right? So as I continue to dive into these national averages for women business ownership, I grew extremely frustrated about the results for minority businesses, minority women-owned businesses. So I made it my mission to really create awareness around the disparity gaps for women businesses. And so I'm launching this project in January, and it's called the We Are Project. And it's threefold: we are, you are, I am, creating parity for women business ownership. And so the kits, the We Are Project kits will actually launch in January, but proceeds from the kits will go to help minority women-owned businesses certify their business, to create distinction within their business, and then also to pay it forward to an organization called Women's Enterprise Foundation, who gives scholarships and grants for minorities. So I would love for you guys to really be part of that journey with me and connect with me on social media. I'll drop my link to my website on there. Thank you, Tiffany, for dropping the one sheet for the We Are Project. But please connect with me. Sign up for my newsletter, connect with me on social media. We will launch the We Are Project group page on Facebook. I would love for you guys to just join that conversation. And it's really navigating these crucial conversations on an online platform, and just, continuing the conversation to support minority and women-owned businesses. And so thank you very much. If you have any questions for me, I am here, would love to answer them for you, but it has been a pleasure.
Thank you. And I did drop your website in the chat as well, so that people have that. We will share that out on social for our team replay. Always grateful for our folks who are here with us on Team Live. You are doing some amazing work, well-earned awards, and all the things that you're doing in this space. I'm so grateful to know you. I know that Subin speaks very highly of you as her novel sister, And thank you for what you brought to this conversation and to our group today. And so, like I said, we'll post on the replay. I'm about to pop the YouTube channel into the chat so you all see that, and that will get posted as well. And we'll see you next Friday, hopefully, everyone. And anything else to add, Suman, before we close out?
If anyone wants to stay another 5 or 10 minutes afterwards for unrecorded session, that's great. Otherwise, Angela, thank you so much. You're amazing. I love how you shared so many great nuggets and actionable items. It wasn't just letting us know, but it also gave call to action. So thank you so much for that, Angela, and for being the amazing you that you are.
My pleasure, Suman. Thank you to you.
Thanks, everyone. Happy weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.